Welcome to RPG Reanimators, a podcast for GMs where we dissect horror scenarios to offer our experiences and advice to reanimate them at the table. I'm Lex.
I'm Holly.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Nathan.
So let's see what's on the slab. Today, we're serving up some more choice cuts, fresh off the operating table. We'll start with Lights Out, then to Spilsbury, number 9485, followed by The Mummy of Pemberly Grange, and then finish everything off with an aperitif of Wreck This Deck. We'll be dissecting and serving up each of these as short cross-sections, though with any dissection, we'll be discussing all the gross innards of all of these scenarios. So from this point on, there will be spoilers. So if you're interested in playing any of these scenarios, please stop here, look at the timestamps in the description, and then share this episode with your GM so that they can listen and continue running these for your group. We'll also include links for where you can purchase copies of these scenarios for yourself in the show notes of this episode. So now with that out of the way, let's serve up these choice cuts. All right, so the first that we're going to open with is Lights Out by Joe Trier, which is found in the collection Fear's Sharp Little Needles by Stygian Fox. I actually encountered this scenario from Holly recommending it to me way back when. I was wanting some kind of modern Call of Cthulhu one-shot that wouldn't require a lot of prep to jump into. And I felt that the scenario was familiar yet unique enough that players wouldn't be able to predict too much that was happening. In a nutshell, there was a group of cultists that called themselves, I'm going to butcher all of this French, Les Gardiens de Flamme Sacrée, whatever, that were
right.
all perfect, right? Right, Holly?
Huh?
Spotless.
Close enough.
That were all holed up at the Chapel of St. Lawrence. They had a copy of some mythos tome called the Livre d'Enfer. And we're enacting a ritual to immolate themselves and sacrifice to free an Ifrit from within its pages. The Ifrit is actually an avatar of Cthulhu. That doesn't really matter. Bottom line, their sacrifice was not enough, but it was good enough to bind their energies to this book, and they've been kind of in this limbo state ever since. Now, the focus of the scenario is on one Alice Miller, who is a teenager. Her boyfriend just passed away in a tragic car accident a couple of weeks ago. And like teenagers in horror movies are wont to do, is reaching out beyond the veil and trying to use Ouija boards to stay in contact with dear Danny. Unfortunately, we don't really know who's on the other end of the line whenever we're sending out all of these Ouija requests. And one of the figures tied to this book responded. Her little brother was there and describes things get really weird, and he wasn't really comfortable with it. And she started talking in a deeper voice. Very good possession vibes. She's gone the next morning. Her parents are kind of a mixed bag of concern. She visits a couple of her best friends and gets them to do the Ouija board, recite something they're possessed to. They spend the rest of the scenario, they run to a college to basically take back their super special book, beating the shit out of everyone that's in their way with superhuman strength. Then whenever they come back, they restudy this ritual and determine that they need more bodies for the fire. And so they use their teenage contacts to set up a massive rager in the burnt-out remains of St. Lawrence Church, back where it all started. At this point, the scenario kind of assumes that the investigators will be hot on their tail. They've seen flyers for this party kind of stapled around or, passed around in messages and Facebook and whatnot. And they need to get there because the girls are setting up this party, and once the doors are locked and chained shut, burning everyone alive inside. If that doesn't work, then Alice is going to skitter away and then lock and burn up her parents and brother in the basement. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I personally just liked it because it felt like a haunting possession story that we've heard 1,000 times before, but had some nice angles to it. What do y'all think?
So just to be clear, are the investigators also college-age students?
That's one of the things I liked about the scenario is that is completely open. There are lots of angles that investigators could come into things. Personally, the angle that I'm going to take is to have all of the player characters be the friends and family of either like Claire and Tammy or concerned neighbors that are just going to innocently stumble on these things.
Yeah.
They could be law enforcement investigating the murders or what have you. It's really up to the keeper.
I'm just imagining a bunch of people being like, hello, fellow kids. Why, yes, I am also at this party. Don't you think this sucks? Let's leave before this place gets set on fire.
Incredible.
Oh God.
It makes me think of the synopsis you gave. It makes me think a little bit of Sinister, the horror movie, which I'm actually quite fond of. I know it's not everybody's favorite, but the possessed kid out to just like kill their whole family kind of thing in a brutally gory way.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I was getting very strong My Best Friend's Exorcism vibes from it, at least thinking from the friends and family player character parts. I didn't catch that on my first read through.
Wonder if you could play as the family of the main girl.
So that would be my first impulse. However, I think that it works where it describes that the dad is very unconcerned, kind of stereotypical dad in an 80s movie. Oh, they're just kids. The mom is very concerned, and the little brother has a lot more information that he's initially letting on just because he's a scared 12-year-old kid. So that was why I was thinking make it the other girls' families because the mom is panicking and texting them. Have you seen Claire? No, Alice came by this morning, but haven't seen him since. They must be out shopping. And then working all of them up into more concern.
Do you think the scenario has good handouts? One of the complaints I have about Fierce Sharp Little Needles is where there's a lot of room for cool handouts, but there aren't really any to begin with. So, but it's been a long time since I've read this one. Are there good handouts for this?
Kind of, sort of. I appreciated the modern aspect because they have some nice kind of like a slideshow of breaking news stories to cover the fire at St. Lawrence's Church to give the investigators a little more clues around there. Actually, there was someone on Reddit, if I can get their name right, because it's always easy to quote Reddit usernames on here. The Jellyfish TFP actually posted a review and shared some of their handouts. And I appreciated the angle that they took with it as you can browse through Alice's computer and see her search history and finding things in there. The reason I haven't run this yet is because, of course, I'm a perfectionist and I want to make very special, juicy handouts for it. So I want to be able to have like the Ouija board that's burnt on the opposite side, maybe in this occult symbol, and other things around in there. In terms of reanimations for it, again, my main goal is to have each of the player characters be immediate friends and family. Each of them will know a secret about the girls. That would be sort of their information. They can interact with them, and it's playfully ambiguous. The possessors can have all the information and knowledge that the girls do, and they can kind of pretend and imitate the girls if they need, but they're never not possessed. So being able to drop some information that way could be a lot of fun and up that emotional hit some more. From there, making some more handouts, and I would rather make the party at the end more of an orchestrated rager and record a great audio handout of them like playing music, and then there's that record scratch and it starts going into the girls' pre-recorded chanting that's all distorted. As they light the building on fire for what should be a much darker kind of climax finale there.
I'm imagining something like the one take from the Talk to Me intro from that movie.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that'd be great. And on the subject of handouts, it would be true horror to incorporate a TikTok dance into a handout.
Oh God.
Oh yeah.
You need to submit a TikTok dance to get the address of where the party is.
God.
Make your players do a TikTok
No.
dance.
Please.
Oh,
I'm cringing.
When the Ifrit hits.
it does sound like you have a room for like really cool digital handouts, like Facebook front pages and things like that. If you wanted to incorporate that.
Because that was my My thought with having the players be the parents is that they would get text messages from other parents saying it's like, someone just mentioned a party, and being able to kind of give passive clues that way, that the other parents in their shitty Facebook group would be saying it's like, well, they're not going to be having it at my house, I'll tell you that. I've seen the flyers around. They're talking about hell and devil worship. There have been some flyers that are made, but yeah, I need some more time with it, but thought I would share it here. For our next cut, Holly, would you like to introduce your scenario?
Absolutely. So the scenario I'm talking about is Spilsbury number 9485, which was written by Adam Gauntlett and can be found also in Fear Sharp Little Needles. And that I just encountered it when I picked up the whole pack and was going through, and the number itself kind of piqued my interest. I was like, what is number 9485 all about? So I scrolled to that one kind of as one of the first ones I read. And that's, I thought it was a really cool scenario. The synopsis is that in the 30s, two investigators on a trip to Constantinople went mad, and one of them murdered the other and stuffed her body in a steamer trunk, and left it at a train station in London. And he attempted to perform some kind of binding ritual, did not succeed. But now this trunk has like a sacrifice and is imbued with these magics, and a spell kind of gone wrong. And so this trunk has come in and out of time in multiple places through London's history. And every time it pops up at a train station on this one particular line. And, hundreds of people are brutally killed. And it gets kind of swept under the rug. At one point, it's like in the middle of the Blitz. So they're like, unfortunately, it's the Blitz, the Germans, And the investigators can be drawn in a couple of different avenues. They could just be people getting off the train and there's this steamer trunk and what is this? And they go to investigate. They could be the police called in, very much see something, say something, some strange suitcase on the London platform and no one's claimed it. They could belong to the Spilsburys, which are a group of people. So Spilsbury was a real person who worked in London and worked closely with Scotland Yard, and did solve a number of mysteries involving bodies stuffed in trunks. And I think that was the inspiration for this. This is like a kind of based on a true story with a little flourish to it.
That's a hell of a thing to put on your resume.
I know, right? I think he was kind of considered one of the fathers of like forensic science, one of the first to kind of break into it. So the investigators could be members of this club that named themselves after him and are focused on forensic science and have like been tracking this trunk and trying to find it, but the trunk always disappears before anyone can take custody of it. So they've never had the opportunity to take it. And the scenario also mentions it mentions and then immediately closes off the opportunity for investigators to be a part of MI6, I think, the British Secret Service or whatever. And they said like, oh, they've been on the trail for this thing forever too, but they cannot be a part of this group. And I'm like, why can't you be a part of this group? That sounds like a fun group to be a part of.
And I remember from your run on ITD, you made the players members of Pisces. Is that right?
Yeah, I did it with a Delta Green bent to it because I was like, this is so like, it's fun. It's more fun for me to kind of come in with a little taste of the knowledge, like, something's wrong here. But instead of just like a bunch of randos on a train platform going, boy, howdy, what's this?
Yeah, because you think you'd just go, oh, there's a body there. Officer, I'm leaving. Good day.
See, now you're giving them motive by giving these pre-gens or this investigator organization.
Right. And I think that, and you can do that via the Spilsburys, who kind of know what it is. And they seem to like operate through back channels, like the police kind of know when this happens to call these people or whatever. So just any kind of investigative group that kind of comes in at least with a little piece of the pie. I'm not, again, the MI6 angle, I think the game doesn't want to give them too much information. Like you don't want to start the players already knowing the majority of the information about it. Maybe that's it. But you can easily write that out as saying like, no one knows anything about this thing because anytime someone goes to try to take it as evidence, it's gone. So I think, that shouldn't hold you back from kind of bringing in a group of people who might know more than the average person.
And so what was it that really drew you to the scenario?
I'm a sucker for like timey-wimey, like weird time loop kind of things, things from beyond, capital B. I think that's the bad guys in this scenario. There's a lot of like, it's terrible for me to say, in my opinion, uninteresting explanation behind what is going, like, ooh, the pineal gland and these things from beyond. I'm like, I don't care about any of that.
Just let it be weird. It's fine.
Yeah, it's weird. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
But there's these time loops that occur in the game. The trunk itself can change the contents based on like what year it's presenting itself to be. So in the 30s, there's the dead body of a woman and this like weird alchemical diagram and things like that. But then the 20s version, they all still have like decomposition in them, but the body's gone. And there's other things. There's other like notes from people that kind of hint at what's going on here. Is this like kind of long story that spans the decades of multiple people trying to stop whatever this thing from beyond, whatever these things are, and not being successful in doing so. So there's like multiple clues from different points in history. The trunk itself like warps the environment around it to suit the time it's in. So there's a lot of fun environmental clues. Like it's not, now it's a steam train just sitting on a modern London train platform. There's election posters from the 20s and the 30s and things like that. So there's a lot of really fun environmental elements to add that I really like too. So that just like pulled me in. I was like, oh, this is fun. I like this kind of thing. So
it feels very fringe.
Oh, it does feel very fringe, yeah.
Yeah.
And how does it tend to get resolved?
The resolution is the things from beyond eventually make an appearance. The trunk is going to kind of keep looping. And the way I had done that as an environmental cue is that like, you know, you start with this line, like you walk into the platform, you run into a man in a long trench coat, you see a teenage girl with like big neon cat headphones and then use that same environmental clue over and over to indicate that they're warping back again and again and again. So that, you know, clues them in like, oh, we're stuck in this loop. And eventually time becomes really corrupted and things are no longer like normal anymore too. Like the police officer that they talked to a couple of times is now like a baby just sitting on the platform. Things like that, like just like weird time like has now become super corrupted. And these things kind of open up portals and appear and start attacking people, which is the explanation for why people die every time this thing shows up. I think investigators can try to get to the bottom of how to, I guess, complete this ritual so it stops happening if they do enough investigation into Spilsbury himself, because the trunk is actually labeled Spilsbury number 9485 as a piece of evidence. So, you know, they can look into Spilsbury, they can look into the history of this trunk and maybe get some clues as to there's a ritual that can be completed to stop all of this. I think it's supposed to be like a really high lethality because the odds of, again, average Joe people like coming into it, finding a ritual, understanding it, and completing it are basically nothing, which is, again, why I like bringing in folks with a knowledge of the supernatural in the first place. But yeah, ostensibly, that's the end of it. Either they all die or they finish the ritual.
And so I'm latching on to that as written bit. So what about the scenario of you changed or reanimated thus far?
I like to bring in handouts. I kind of, spoiler alert, I hinted at it earlier that the handouts for Fear Sharp Little News has a lot of fun scenarios and not a lot of handouts. So bringing in handouts, more detailed like letters and things to kind of drop hints as to what's happening through all this like time and place. 'Cause it's always just, oh, letters hint at, I have some great undertaking and, you know, no one must know. And you can just like flesh that out a little bit. Right. And then I think I decided on time becoming more corrupted as things from beyond get closer and closer to appearing to the investigators. So I like doing that, something I changed. And I had a lot of fun with this actually, because I had decided I wanted to really hit on these things had changed. This had been an issue for decades now. And so the first time I ran this game, I did a handouts over like a handouts through time. So like the first handout they get on a floppy disk. And I had a floppy disk reader and I had to like, you know, they had to like find a place to put it, plug it in and everything. Like this was in person, of course. So, you know, and I decided in one run to do it like all over the world, like it could appear anywhere or whatever. So one handout I did, I work with my friend who natively speaks Mandarin, and she did like a whole recording on tape for me, like describing the events of what had happened to her and her friends. And I had that on a little cassette tape and then so that was another like piece of like evidence through time. And so they had to find like something to play a cassette tape. And then eventually it all culminated into like all this evidence had been gathered on an iPhone that they had to like break open, figure out the password, and like get all this information to. So that was the only time I did it. I think in the end, it was like the novelty of clues through time was more interesting than the actual like what was happening. So I was like, okay, never mind.
Oh, yeah, what were we doing here?
It's it's just like it will, and also it's like you can only say the same thing so many times. Of like eyewitness accounts end up being the same over and over and over again. So it's like, okay, we're just kind of reading the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's a really fun scenario. I think you don't really need to do much to tweak it and add some changes. And because time is so wibbly wobbly, I guess it's easy to kind of make it your own and add environmental effects and cues and things to just make it more interesting.
So an idea that I've been kind of rattling around upstairs is, I know that you said that it's nicer to have your player characters be a little more focused and at least privy that there are unnatural things. This kind of strikes me like a Dead Light-esque scenario that you could potentially drop into the middle of a campaign so that you would really surprise your players, saying it's like, oh, you need to take a train to Chicago. And so, okay, I go to the station, boom, they just encountered this and need to just run through this shitstorm.
Oh, that's a great idea, Lex.
So something fun about this scenario is it very much hints at Horror on the Orient Express. There's not major spoilers to it. And you can even hint more heavily at it in the handouts, but it all like it's heavily implied that the investigators were on the Orient Express chasing down whatever puts the investigators in that big campaign on this whole track too. Except for the From Beyond stuff. I'll just say like that really doesn't have anything to do with Horror on the Orient Express. So no spoilers there. But you can, in the middle of Horror on the Orient Express, if you want to do kind of like a fun vignette, you can have this as a modern scenario vignette in which they just get a little bit more information, and you can like hint more heavily at what's going on and like who are these people that they're chasing after? What's this bad guy, this big bad evil guy that is in the campaign? I don't want to spoil it for half of the people of this podcast, but yeah, there's a way to insert it into Horror on the Orient Express at the appropriate time to like even provide more information.
I fully support this so that my investigator can get an iPhone for the remainder of Orient Express.
Are you kidding? It's going to be your investigator realizes a piece of their luggage is missing, and that's all you get. And then later it shows up again. I'm a little surprised, though, that they went with the From Beyond when a Hounds of Tindalos seems like it makes more sense, as it just keeps warping time and people get caught in loops into the Hounds are like, nah, man, that's too much. That's way too much. Stop it. And then they kill everybody.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of a weird angle to go with it. I was like, okay.
Maybe they just wanted to do something different. Maybe Hounds was too obvious.
Yeah, that's fair.
I played in your run, and then I understand you had a run for ITD.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me about some of the shenanigans that happened in your many runs of this?
So this was probably not my best choice, but I did it and it was fun anyway. So, and I can't remember if I did this with your group or not, Alex, but for sure in ITD, I involved Delta Green. Like the characters were Pisces,
yeah, that guy.
Pisces. And then I was like, let's give them someone who has a little bit more knowledge, like, someone that you can bring in who can also do some exposition for the players. With the full realization that like, like why would Delta Green be in London conducting any kind of investigation? So yeah, maybe not the best choice on my part, maybe just one of the Spilsburys, but they ended up being very funny human shields.
Well, what if they got sucked into it from, they said like, no, I was just in New York, that like anybody.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, I suppose. Yeah, there's way, again, you can play with time and space and all of that, but yeah, they, it was basically the shady guy on the platform that looks like he knows something or is being really nosy and trying to figure out what you guys are doing. And then, it led to I think a pretty violent interrogation at one of my games, possibly by Alex. And
I'm shocked.
I plead the fifth.
And yeah, then just using them as blatant human shields when those things from beyond came and they're like, nah man, those guys can fight it. or Tom from Into the Darkness sacrificing the baby police officer for the ritual. He's like, yeah, let's do it.
In a bathroom, I think, right?
Yeah. But that's the fun
God.
part of playing Pisces, right? Is they're
so unsanitary.
yeah. It's killing him, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the benefit of playing Pisces is that you have like no morals. So it's like, and they have deep interest in the supernatural and finding out that information for themselves and dabbling in it rather than just eliminating it. So he's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's kill this kid. Let's kill this baby.
Cross this off the list.
All right, listeners. So for the third cut, I have chosen The Mummy of Pemberley Grange by Allan Carey and Nic Holland of the Seeds of Terror collection. You can find this on DriveThruRPG off of the Miskatonic Repository program. It's a short and sweet 4-page scenario. And when I say 4 pages, I mean that's like the meat and potatoes, not including the handouts or the pre-gens or the stats. So this is all about a mummy unwrapping party. And this is a weird historical truth. This is something that actually happened because back in the late 19th century, rich British socialites, they would just ship mummies back to their lavish manners and unwrap them. I don't know why. But, you know, that's okay.
Why not?
The internet didn't exist.
Because we're rich.
Because we can't get canceled. All right. Anyway.
Ew.
So what happens is they go, the investigators, the pre-gens, they are all attendees of an unwrapping party. They go to the luxurious estate of Jessica Pemberley, who invites them all. And then the mummy comes alive, and it's just pure chaos. It's pretty much invincible, except for the one plot convenient ritual to stop it, which involves cooking up the contents of canopic jars and eating them while reciting ancient scripts. But it's just like a great pick, plug and play scenario.
Is it the mummy's canopic jars, or can anybody?
Yeah, it's the mummies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good thing they brought those along too.
It's very entertaining to see what the PCs do trying to stop the mummy. Like they'll shoot it and then they'll realize, oh, it doesn't die like that. So then they try setting it on fire, and the only thing worse than a mummy trying to kill them is a flaming mummy trying to kill them. And
what if they just put something very heavy on it?
Oh no, it's super strong.
Oh, okay.
GM hand waving.
That actually sounds like a lot of fun. Of how does this mummy not die due to what you just did?
Right. And there's a lot of great like tight mechanics behind it. There's like a timed mechanic where every one of the PCs, they're losing power as the mummy stays alive, so they can't just like run away. And the handouts, there's only like a handful of handouts. One in particular stands out, and that is the blueprint of the estate Grange mansion. It is absolutely beautiful. You can tell that's where the budget went. And what's super cool is that during the scenario, the mummy can use the secret passageways of the mansion to get around and enter rooms that aren't obvious that it can enter in. But what's cool is the handout actually shows the secret passageways. So when the player's like,
nice.
Oh, well, it just showed up, that's unfair. The GM can be like, well, look at the map.
It's right there.
Yeah, it's right there. So, no.
Watch yourself, counselor.
Well, actually.
No reverse.
What else? There's a butler that is pretty much fodder that you can kill off early to show the mummy's strength. Jessica Pemberley, she goes absolutely crazy when she sees that mummy come to life. The thing that kicks off the scenario is a crazed cultist professor who is in charge of the unwrapping unalives himself, like over the mummy, and he drips his blood over it. So that's a shocking scene.
As one is wont to do, yes.
Yeah.
Of course. But But there's a few things that I would change. So during my runs, I typically give one of the pre-gens, Clayton Moody. He's a dilettante. He's got 30 power, and with the power drain that you're going to be calling to speed the players along, that's way too little. Like that's 6, like minimum, that you call over the course of maybe 2 or 3 hours until he just like turns to dust. So yeah, and they turn to dust when they lose power.
I like that.
And there's no real like descriptor for showing a visible effect of the power drain, and I would add that as a way to signpost and signal that, hey, your power is being drained, instead of just, oh, you lose this amount.
So as an alternative, would you rather have Clayton sort of be the guinea pig NPC to showcase don't do this, and the butler just has a disgusting amount of POW as the replacement character? They have like 80 starting POW, and it's like,
Oh yeah,
yes.
he works at Bedlam Hall. That's why he has a disgusting amount of power. I would actually make the butler a backup PC or just another pre-gen, because like that way you could keep Clayton at 30 pounds, have him melt, and then give someone the butler. But also, since this is so short, like they're allowed to just die in horrible ways. So
Is it too on the nose to have people dissolve to sand?
Sand's good. That's good flavor.
That feels very mummy.
That feels like that would have been the default. Like the POW is, oh, my nose is starting to flake off and it's not coming back.
Yeah, I was imagining like their joints are kind of cracking, and it's just like, oh, my skin is so dry, and like they're digging away part of their cheek.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's excellent flavor. And speaking of flavor, it's entertaining to see the investigators cooking the contents of the canopic jars while reciting. Usually what happens is like they barricade the kitchen and it's trying to break in, and they're cooking and eating this like human meat. It's quite terrifying. But yeah.
How accessible is that solution? If I remember correctly, is it like locked behind a language?
It's locked behind the language, and if you don't have the language, there's like a book in the library. I feel like there's a lot of mental gymnastics that the PCs have to do. So yeah, I would definitely remove the language barrier. Sure, that might speed things along, but also it makes it more like, I guess fair is a very difficult and subjective thing to argue in a Call of Cthulhu scenario.
So here's an idea. If the scenario kicks off with the one already crazed professor, maybe they were the Egyptologists that were translating all of the records and things, and they found that maybe by bringing this to life, it could do something else or get them something. So they have all of the notes in their breast pocket. And so as they, I'm assuming, slit their throat over the mummy or something, if they turn him over, they need to pull this bloody diary out and kind of look through his madman's ravings for like an easier path to find the ritual.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
You could be reading aloud from them during the unwrapping or something, so you could have them see it as well before he tucks it away.
Yeah.
I also like
just have the butler figure it out. Just give him a super high whatever language he
Butler,
needs.
90 POW, 90
DMPC.
Egyptology.
Oh, actually, I've studied this while I was butling along the Nile.
I have a copy of the Rosetta Stone right in my apartment.
One must keep up with Madame Grange's eccentricities. Yes.
Oh boy, I guess you could probably translate this into a Bedlam Hall scenario if you really wanted to.
The part
Actually,
of me,
I could kind of see that,
Yeah.
honestly.
yeah.
The Blackwoods are going to have an unwrapping party.
Just let the mummy tire himself out.
Oh boy.
The part of me that always creates more work for myself kind of wants to give you an additional puzzle aspect to the players at the end. So maybe even after they get the ritual, it calls for ingredients and like ancient Egyptian stuff. So if they're in the kitchen, like they need to find cilantro to mix in with the canopic
my
jars, but it's
God.
called something else. And so like make it a guessing game for players, or just throw everything into the pot.
This is the first time people die due to a failed cooking roll.
Oh, imagine making them roll to cook. That'd be agony.
You're going to have to
cooked it wrong.
steam
Do
the
it again.
contents to make them juicy again.
Oh no, just boil it in water. Like all. So I first encountered this scenario back in 2021, which was so long ago. For the Miskatonic Repository Con.
The physical prop GM within me, because I do play a lot of games in person, and the evil GM in me wants to like cook something for my players.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
That then they would have to eat as they're doing this.
Just
But
give
it
them
would
different bits
it
of
would be
jerky.
delicious food because I'm a good cook, but you know, you can get something that at least looks
this
unappealing.
mummy is actually pretty good.
This tastes like gumbo.
Oh my god, imagine like getting a canopic jar like prop and then like putting gumbo in it and just getting like a ladle and just like slapping that into a
Getting it
bowl in
there.
front of the players.
I may or may not already have a set of canopic jars to do
Oh,
this.
there you go. You know, canopic jars should be part of any kitchenware set.
Truly.
I know the professor's dead, but man, we really got to do this again.
Is that what you left in our break room the other day?
No comment.
And for our fourth choice cut, Nathan, I understand you once again have decided to do something completely different.
Yeah, I went off assignment because you guys said we need a scenario that you want to talk about. And I said, no, I won't do that. I want to talk about a game called Wreck This Deck
What is
by
this,
Becky
accusation
Annison.
disorder?
Yeah.
It's been too long since we had
because
one,
I've
so
played this. I've played
Oh,
this.
okay.
Therefore, it is legitimate. So I came across this. It's, I think, 35, not including the notes page. People, notes pages do not count for page count. It is a solo journaling and deck crafting game for the discerning demonologist. So for some reason, my local game store had this. I picked it up, and basically what you do is you play a deck runner. Now, it sounds like YuGiOh, but it isn't, but it could be. You could flavor this as YuGiOh if you wanted. I won't judge. But you take a classic 52 card deck, and what you'll be doing is you'll actually be marking up the cards and using the cards to form like tarot style readings to determine how narrative goes. So it's very loose on what exactly the setting is. In theory, the base setting is sometime after 2020, dealing with, you know, everybody, like the rich getting richer, corporations, all that sort of stuff. And it presents deck runners as kind of this outside demonology people that use decks of cards that they've modified to trap demons, summon demons, work magic,
and then duel.
that sort of thing.
Oh.
Again, you could make this happen. I did not play it that way. I've not tested it or thought about it at all, but you could make it happen. So the main mechanic, though, is fortune telling. And what you do is you set out, you draw some number of cards depending on what the spread is. If you're familiar with tarot, there's different spreads you can do. And there's just a small table that gives you prompts for what each card might mean. So very similar to a tarot deck is you just lay them out and you kind of interpret from there and journal about, okay, what is this telling me is happening right now? However, you can also perform rituals with your deck. So to try and make something happen, you actually play more cards and interpret it much the same way you do fortune telling. But ritual works best if you have demons. And that's another action you can take, which is binding demons to the deck. And that's usually something narratively that the demon might ask something. You're going to make a big modification to the card. Like you might cut it up and then sew it back together. They say you might burn some of it. You might anoint it with blood. It's supposed to be very creative in how you're dealing with these cards. So at the end of it, you end up with a really interesting deck. And it's pretty neat. I played it shortly. I went with more of like an old-timey, pulpy detective sort of feel. I had my deck runner something bad happened, so he had to come up with a new deck and just kind of improv from there with the spread of like, okay, what happened? Why is he on the run? What does he have to do? Do I have to summon a demon? The answer is yes, you probably should, because it's one of the core mechanics. But it really flowed pretty well, and it was a fun exercise to interpret these different cards for making a story.
Very cool. So you're drawing and defacing these cards. You're wrecking a deck.
You are wrecking a deck.
Matthew Sanderson would be
Yes.
livid.
He could never. Clutching his pearls, turning over in his grave.
Yeah, you end up with a really cool personalized sort of experience, though, right? Is you might have a card like that might just say magic as the prompt, but maybe as you're playing, it always comes up when your friend is in the room. So maybe you just write that friend's name on there, and then that becomes part of when you draw that card for the spread. You would incorporate that.
You've activated my trap card, Jerry.
I like the you were talking about being an old timey detective. I like the idea of like almost a film noir type.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love that. That sounds really interesting, Nathan.
It's fun. There's a lot of prompts for specific demons as well, and gives you ideas of how to activate the card. Like when you bind this demon, start drawing a fly on the card. Once the entire card is filled with flies, you burn it or something happens. So it's got little built-in mechanics that things should escalate over time. Of course, since you're the one drawing the flies, you make them as big as small as you want. Can you draw a fly? Can you not? And the challenges are what you make of them, not necessarily driven by the game.
I'm sorry if you said this already. What is the conclusion to, like, how do you know when you're like finished, right? I don't know.
Yeah, there isn't really a defined finish. And I think if you were to try and run this as like a campaign, you might have to think about making some sort of narrative arc towards this, setting up things like maybe a major villain or something that's not explicitly put into this. This is more of a, just play it as long as you want, put it down, pick it up. It's kind of its own solo thing. And I have a very important question. How do you feel about hashtags in your gaming writing? Because this was released in 2003, and they're like, hey, check out this hashtag whatever to see people's decks and whatnot. And I love the idea, but it feels like it's aged very poorly.
Yeah,
I would support TikTok dances more, to be quite honest.
Oh my lord.
It would TikTok dance to talk about your scenario.
Be sure to do the heart of the cards on TikTok and share it with your friends.
I've definitely run across a few things too where it's like, oh, use this online thing. I think Yaziba's Bed and Breakfast was another one recently that said, we're going to use the one more multiverse or something. And then before the books dropped, one more multiverse was like, we're done, guys. So just if you're writing these things, technology is cool, but also it can go away or things can happen.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
But I would, at some point, it'd be kind of neat to do, maybe at a con or something, do a multi-deck sort of something with this. I think you could come up with fun interactions between players.
Well, Nathan, I hope you know that I am just tasking you to reanimate this system into a Yu-Gi-Oh RPG that we can all play at Necronomicon.
I've got, I won't date the episode. I don't have a lot of time left.
Oh no.
I when I was looking through all of our write-ups, my eye just went straight to Yu-Gi-Oh and then refused to read anything else. And I was like, is Nathan talking about a Yu-Gi-Oh RPG today? Like, I love it, but I was confused.
I'm so excited. Oh.
If it was cheap enough, you could absolutely do the same thing with a Yu-Gi-Oh deck of just throw out the cards, interpret what the spread means. If you got the Pot of Greed, which hell of a drop. I know so much about Yu-Gi-Oh, guys. Maybe that means one thing. Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon comes
Let's redraw
out.
two
That's
cards.
a demon. Yeah.
And then I draw another 2 cards.
And then, all those other cards we're all so familiar with from Yu-Gi-Oh could show up and you could interpret them. Why not?
And then I Uno revert. Wait.
I'll just get in here.
We hope our deranged utterings are helpful in bringing these games to life at your table. You can join the autopsy discussion on Discord and subscribe or follow the podcast to hear more gruesome cases. Be sure to check out the show notes for links on where to find these scenarios or card systems, where to find us, and other links for things like handouts, actual plays of the scenarios we recommend, and other resources. So until next time, thanks for listening to RPG Reanimators.
Where your games can die.
Or live.
Or on the table.
Got him.
That's fine.
I'm
Lex
sorry.
can cut
That's
out
an
one of them.
unwrap.
So, to be fair,
Hey.
I'm usually in red, but Nathan, you looked at me for a second, and I was like, I need to say it because Nathan.
What do you mean looked at you? We're on
I heard the Kill Bill.
It's time to duel.
I thought we were doing them in order.
Fuck it up, and guess what I did?
I've captured the Leviathan with my community chest.
Oh. Bank error in your favor.
Boy, that could only
Right
mean
to jail.
Beelzebub.
And now all of its attack is now its defense.